Hello. Hello. We're waiting on Mace's show to end, so it's all good. We can just chill here for a minute. Jive-ass turkeys. Turkeys that jive.
You're just gobble gobble.
I'm waiting on Mace to finish up. I didn't mean to start.
Yeah, jive it. He just finished.
He just finished? Okay.
Sure, man.
I'm alright. How are you?
I'm good. Chilling.
Word.
Killing. We just talked about the rough topic of pedophilia.
Sweet.
Do you think
Maybe we can... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, based like what Travis said, based off your profile picture, Thomas, could I say you're a fan of Mushroom Head?
No. No, please, God, no.
I don't believe it.
Don't ever accuse me of liking Mushroom Head.
Oh, now we're gonna get into the accusations again.
Dude, Mushroom Head is like one of those bands, Travis, that they wear like the masks and all that shit.
Sorry. Yeah, they're bad. They're real bad. They're like Limp Bizkit bad. You know what I'm saying? They're real bad. Ew.
It's a guilty pleasure.
Hey, it's okay. I'm not judging. I'm just saying ooh for me. I'm not saying ooh for you. Yep, I'm judging you. You're a nasty piece of shit for listening to Limp Bizkit.
Give it to me straight.
I just did. You bastard. How worthless. How worthless. Get on the topic of Limp Bizkit, but hey, we're here.
Is your biscuit limp? Call in.
Call in, please tell us.
Once you find yourself doing it all for the nookie, just
Oh, the 90s.
Good times, man.
The early 2000s and the late 90s. Just an atrocious period for music.
What about Sir Elton John in the 90s?
It's been a while since I've listened to his albums from his later career.
The Big Picture album, man.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that one.
Did you like the album, or what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of. The main genre of the whole album, it seemed to me.
Oh, that's cool.
Good. It was good. I liked it.
Nice.
I was listening to it while working out, which doesn't seem like the best hype music, but you know. It gets me focused though. I don't always like to listen to just hype and EDM type music, which does help, EDM especially when I'm like lifting. But I just like to kind of be in the zone.
A second, click on the invite button and invite all your pals on call into the room. Everyone's welcome here.
Everyone is
We
very
need
welcome
to do a
here.
better. We all need to help chip in and do a better job at helping promote our room. So I need you guys' help with that. So
What
definitely.
do I go to more?
now, if you click the three little dots, you should be able to invite
share
people.
room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
share
you can't-
room.
Gary.
Share room.
Perry, if you've never listened to Wu-Tang Clan while you're working out, just thank me later.
Oh, bro, it ain't nothing to fuck with. Like I've obviously I've been down that phase. I probably have listened to it within the past month while working out and not even realizing it. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Dude,
the 36
listen
Chambers
to-
is a great album.
Listen to Method and Red Black.
You said Method Man? Okay.
It's a good one too.
So tight.
Good stuff. So,
when you're
yes.
all right, sorry. When you're
Hello?
Am I bugging or is he cut out?
He cut out.
because you can't actually. You can only do that when you're in callers. At least I can. You can't invite.
You cut out there. Yeah, you
we've
cut
heard
out
like
there for a
4
little bit.
words total.
Oh, no.
Go just invite. You can't invite your followers when you're a speaker.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I was just looking for, honestly.
So you'd have to drop down to be a caller,
mean-
then come back to speakers, as I did just here.
Okay.
No, but you can copy link and then send that link out on other like social
you can do
media,
that.
right? So if you're on like Facebook or Twitter or
But
something,
then
copy link back. Hey, check it out, guys. We're having a cool discussion. Oh, in calling already? Yeah.
Boys and girls, lads and lasses, are you ready for the Tulsa time? I know you're not, so just don't answer. Okay, lie to me, please.
You know, I'm always ready.
I know you are.
So.
How's your COVID doing, Scott?
Dude,
Oh,
I still feel like ass, but I've been taking a ton. Like I took Mucinex, I took some Alka-Seltzer cold and flu, so I'm like loading up on all like the over the counter kind of shit, and I feel all right now. But I know like, it's gonna suck.
Oh yeah.
You pounding vitamin C? You gotta just pound vitamin C, like. every other hour.
Like I don't do like emergency that kind of that's like sort of like junk.
Emergency, yeah. I use Zip Fizz, something called Zip Fizz. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's got a bunch of different shit in it.
Yeah, like any of that kind of stuff, like vitamin C supplements. If you eat like 2 oranges, you're gonna get more actual vitamin C than if you take supplements.
Yeah, it's like 10,000 milligrams.
Yep. COVID before, and last night, dude, I hurt so fucking bad. Like I couldn't do anything. Mine, like and I just laid in bed for fucking 12 hours just in misery. Fucking
Sorry.
sucked.
Yeah, that's tough.
That is tough. a fucking wonderful night, a night to remember.
No,
It's it's like those wonderful nights where your stomach doesn't stop hurting and you have to go shit like 18 times. Those are the best. Those are the best.
Yeah.
Those are the most wonderful because you feel just
feel free not to answer this, but did you have a booster recently? I'm debating whether or not I want to get one.
Initial two, I didn't get a booster yet. They just became available for me where I live. I didn't do it yet, but I also just got invisible. I think that's probably how I fucking got it because I have to put my fucking hands.
I always get sick when I get drunk. You know, like I try not to.
right now, but I for you guys so we can have some academic fun. What's that?
Is that empirically true?
Yes, it's empirically true. 100%. I'm calling it. So basically, we covered rationalism last time we episode because last week's was the interview with Kane, which was wonderful. We had like a 9-hour fucking show. That cannot happen tonight. I can't go 9 hours. I can't do it. But we talked about rationality, which is, we talked about schools of thought in epistemology, and we're going to cover rationalism, empiricism, skepticism, and a few other ideas based on pragmatism, things like that, and kind of wrap it all up because we're getting towards the very end of the epistemology series. So basically, we talked about rationality as using the source of knowledge of a prioricity or a priori knowledge. Now we're going to talk about the side of the coin that is associated with sensory data, a posteriori information. So, in general philosophy, because you can talk about it in the philosophy of science, you can talk about it in the philosophy of epistemology, but in general philosophy, empiricism is the epistemological theory that holds that knowledge or justification comes only from primary sensory experience. So there are many different forms of empiricism, but most strict empiricists of the day, and we're going to get into the history of it a little bit, most empiricists of the day were directly... I'm sorry, somebody had some feedback there. It just threw me off. I didn't know if somebody had something to say or whatever. But I didn't mean to do that. All right, so empiricism emphasizes the central role of empirical evidence in the foundation of ideas rather than innate ideas or a priori traditions. So we're going to get, when we have my science series, which is going and the empirical methods, but there are many different types of empiricists, and there are also many empiricists that don't throw out rationalism, like me. I believe rationalism and empiricism are a synergy. They're a duality, two sides of the same coin, however you want to see it. But they lead into one another as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure there are arguments against that, but regardless, some of them are both. Some of them are strict empiricists, but these strict empiricists are claiming the ones that were from the 17, 18, 1900s, they were saying specifically that sensory experience, that our phenomenology, our sensory data, observation, all that kind of stuff was our key to understanding the world, and not just a priori reasoning. Throw your 2 cents in, Perry?
Nope, sounds good so far.
That sound about right from what you've read?
Yep, I mean, this is you're saying the two sides of the same coin, which I completely agree with, and some people just love to be on one side and not the other.
It was more so back in the day where they used to do that, between like Francis and epistemological theory. But if you look at empiricism and the philosophy of science, which we will also cover, it emphasizes evidence, data, facts about the world, especially as discovered in experiments. So it is a fundamental part of the scientific methods. A priori reasoning or intuition. So let's see if this is important to cover. Probabilistics. Yeah, empiricism, often used by the natural scientists, say that knowledge is based on experience and that knowledge is tentative and probabilistic, subject to continued revision and falsification. Empiricism is, like the correspondence theory of truth, directly related to these differing forms of scientific methods, which I will have probably 1 or 2 episodes on the scientific method and empirical evidence, and we'll explain what all that means. But I guess I could give a bit of background here, and then we can get into the history. Did anybody want to make a
differing methods of different scientific methods?
Yeah, there are different scientific methods. Yeah. There are circular ones, there are straight line ones, there are ones that don't include testing. There are many different types of scientific. The main one is observation.
Like the 7 of them, the list of 7 or whatever.
And then you finally, after everything has been done as much as it possibly can be by human society, then it becomes a theory, or it becomes incorporated into another theory as a self-correcting methodology. But did you want to throw?
No, I'm good.
Claim it. Absolutely. Hold no knowledge to be properly inferred, inductively or abductively, or deduced deductively, unless it is example, knowledge of God. Ideas. Also advocates of the empirical scientific method, obviously. So, people who were doing philosophy pre-scientific revolution were still doing science. They just weren't doing it the same way that we're doing it now. So I guess we could talk about the really early empiricism. Between 600 and 200 BCE, the Vaishnakia, I can't pronounce it. Vaisheshika school of Hindu philosophy, founded by the ancient Indian philosopher, perception and inference as the only two reliable sources of knowledge. So this is pretty far back before a little bit during, kind of gets into the same time as the 330 BCE. Its members rejected the doctrines of the dogmatic school, preferring to rely on the observation of phantasiae, or phenomena, the appearances. So the empiric school is closely allied with the Pyrrhonist school of philosophy, which made the philosophical case about tabula rasa, like John Locke talked about. He thinks, let's see, that's not important. Okay, let's move on. Aristotle's explanation of how this was possible was potentiality and actuality, and experience of some sense perceptions still required the help of the active nous. I am going to look at that. What is the active nous? The active intellect. Okay. These notions contrasted with Platonic notions of the human mind as an entity that pre-existed somewhere in the head, as well as other works that he's done. So Aristotle was considered to give a more important position to sense perception than Plato. It seems to be that way with Socrates, or Socrates, Plato, however that works up. And commentators in the Middle Ages summarized one of his positions as, ooh, that's a hell of a Latin phrase, Latin for nothing in the intellect without first being in the senses. So that's an interesting phrase to me, because obviously but it's still filtered through the senses. So that phrase from the Middle Ages, nothing in the intellect without first being in the senses, is interesting. What do you think, Carrie?
So Aristotle and Plato pretty much had two completely different ideas in terms of the mind, one being in the realm of ideas and the other being a posteriori by Aristotle.
Is a pluralist, so remember he thought that like ideas and abstracts had actual physical realms in which they existed, to where you could have strength or humanity or goodness or these things like that. They actually existed in some form of ontology that he came up with.
And did you say that there was, you said 1600 and then you said that school that was in India or something?
No, that was from 600, between 600 and 200 BCE, this Hindu philosophy school. It was just making a reference to early empiricism.
Were they influenced by
the etymology of the term empirical comes from the ancient Greek empiria, which translates.
There's that word for phenomena in the Hindu.
Yes. So basically, I was just giving an example of how Hindu traditions, and maybe even perhaps Chinese traditions that not mentioned on Stanford, really. No, I was just reading. I was just giving a random tangent into the fact that these other cultures were doing these having these empirical ideas.
Right. So it was probably independent of each other that they.
I don't think in those times that they knew certain.
Oh yeah. They thought that they were like, the Romans especially thought that they were like, even a little bit later than that, like even like 500, 600 years later, they were still pretty unaware.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, they were definitely unaware, disconnected.
That's crazy to think of.
Yeah, because horses were as fast as you could get somewhere. Let's see. Did I already just read that? Yes, I did.
Hello?
Okay, so Islamic Golden Age
What's up,
and
Dal?
pre. What's up, Dally Dal? I didn't see you pop in. Sorry.
Yeah, I've been here for a minute. I was trying to say something, but my mic was
Oh.
working. Yeah, there
I'm
was
sorry.
cultural communication. Was like found to be linked all.
Interesting.
Studied in India, and he definitely did in Egypt. So like, he spent years of his life
Yeah, because
traveling around the world.
Hindu goes back like 5,000 BC, maybe even more. So, so I mean, who knows? I guess you said China and Mesopotamia. So I don't know what the Greeks and Hindus, if they would have had any connections.
Maybe
Yeah,
I might
they
revise
would-
my statement and say that they probably were aware of other cultures, but they may have not been in direct communication with other intellectual philosophers. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't think the countries necessarily were like had diplomacy going on, but there was definitely people traveling between them and exchanging ideas.
Yeah,
and
those
learning
ideas.
languages.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point to make. I should have brought that up. The Islamic Golden Age and the pre-Renaissance, 5th to 15th century. There's not a lot of. Let's see. I don't have a lot of notes. I think is important to understand, and what is a little too much information, because some of this is not irrelevant, but it is. Let's see. During the Middle Ages, Aristotle's theory of tabula rasa was developed by Islamic philosophers, starting with Al-Farabi in 872 to 951 CE. So I'm assuming the Common Era. So that's a good ways, into the almost 1000 AD, basically. Let's see. For example, the tabula rasa is a pure potentiality that is actualized through education, and knowledge is attained through empirical familiarity with objects in this world from which one abstracts universal concepts. This was developed through a syllogistic method of reasoning in which observations led to propositional statements, which, when compounded, lead to further abstract concepts. So they were doing classical syllogistic logic. They were understanding, sensory perceptions were some form of empirical. There's a lot of different ways that they're saying this, is what I'm getting at here. Let's see, Desert Island. In 12th century, Muslim philosopher. I can't pronounce a lot of these names, so that's why I'm not covering it. You would have to go and read on the Stanford Philosophy of the Islamic Golden Age and Pre-Renaissance if you want to know about that more. Because seriously, some of these, here's what most of these are Muslim and Islamic Muslim traditions, and a few Hindu traditions that they're talking about here that dealt with empiricism. So go do a little research for that on yourself, see if you can pronounce all the names involved with this. But I guess we could go to the British empiricism. Let's jump ahead. Let's not go to Renaissance, because that is not when a lot of the empiricism and the rationalism was done. That was during the late 17th century onwards. So, did anybody want to say anything before I get into British empiricism?
I'm good.
Okay. So, British empiricism emerged during the 17th century as an approach to early modern philosophy and modern science. Although both integral to this overarching transition, Francis Bacon in England advised empiricism at 1620, whereas René Descartes in France upheld rationalism around 1640, a distinction drawn by Immanuel Kant in Germany. You have Francis Bacon in England in 1620, empiricism, which he had a special form of empiricism, but then you would have René Descartes around 1640 upholding his form of this weird subjective rationalism that's almost idealistic, but he was an analytical philosopher and a mathematician. So, but then the distinction was drawn between the imperial, from what I'm seeing here, between rationalism and empiricism from Immanuel Kant. So Bacon's natural philosophy, which is science, was influenced by Italian philosopher Bernardino Telesio, and by Swiss physician Paracelsus. So, contributing later in the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes and Baruch Spinoza, very popular names, are retrospectively identified likewise as an empiricist and a rationalist, respectively. So, in the Enlightenment during the 18th century, both George Berkeley in England and David Hume in a lead precedented in the late 17th century by John Locke, also in England, hence the dominance of empiricism in British philosophy. So that's basically the formation of what we know as empiricism today, and the arguments between rationalism, subjective idealism, which Berkeley held. He had a weird idea of idealism as an ontology. It's really cool to look into Berkeley and Hume and their British empiricist ideologies. It also associates with like logical positivism. Either sensory or self-evidently true propositions, like triangle has three sides, things like that. What is that called? Something is a logical truth, true by definition. Yes. Yeah, true by definition would be a tautology. Um, Foundational. Yeah, many different ways to express that. So let's see, how much further do we want to go through British empiricism? Because you got the idea there.
I think of Descartes as a rationalist more so than an empiricist.
He is. That's what I was describing a minute ago. Advised mainly empiricism in 1620. René Descartes upheld his form of rationalism 1640, and a distinction drawn by Kant in Germany near 1780. So yeah, he's dealing with a lot of in response to the early to mid 17th century continental rationalism, an essay concerning human understanding in 1689, a very influential view wherein the only knowledge humans can have is a posteriori experience, phenomenological experience. So Locke is famously attributed with holding the proposition that the human mind is a tabula rasa, which I think Noam Chomsky has shown that that's not necessarily the case. However, there are people who argue it is, so I'm trying not to just read off. So what should I do? The former. So according to Locke, our knowledge of things is a perception of ideas. Ways on my show, but our knowledge of things is a perception of ideas that are in accordance or discordance with each other, which is very different from the quest for. A generation later, the Irish Anglican bishop George Berkeley determined that Locke's view immediately opened a door that would lead to eventual atheism. So in response to Locke, he put forth his treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge in 1710, an important challenge to empiricism, in which things only exist either as a result of their being perceived or by virtue of the fact that they are an entity doing the perceiving. So for Berkeley, God fills in for humans by doing the perceiving whenever humans are not around to do it. Okay.
What's his evidence for that? I'm
You
sure
got
he
me,
has some,
brother. You
but,
got
like,
me, brother.
What led him to that conclusion? I'm actually very curious. Because I mean,
He has a text called. He has a text called the Alciphron, and I haven't read that, so I don't know his view on it.
I mean, I can see a good argument. Technology, is that kind of what he's saying?
Well, he's saying that if there's no humans around to observe
Like a tree falls in the
phenomenology,
woods.
yeah, that kind of shit, then God would be there, and there would be no logical problem, right, of this
So
lack
he
of
just
perception.
he made it an unfalsifiable claim that he can't be proven wrong on, and he took it and ran with it. Got it.
Yeah, it is an unfalsifiable claim to say that any deity would be a replacement for a phenomenological agent, a sensory agent. But anyway, Berkeley maintained that any order humans may see in nature is the language or handwriting of God. So Berkeley's approach to empiricism would later be called subjective idealism. Okay, this is a type of ontology, and in subjective idealism, it's a philosophical monism, an ontological monism like materialism, that holds that only minds and mental contents exist. So the world is made of ideas. Our phenomenology all together is creating this idealistic existence. It entails and is generally identified or associated with immaterialism, the doctrine that material things do not exist. So subjective idealism is a very interesting thing. You should go read about it with Berkeley. He was an idealist. He was an empiricist. He was a God man. He was a very, very, very cool dude to read about, including David Hume and Locke and all the other empiricists in the early days of the scientific method. Let's see. I guess we could read a little bit about Hume. Yeah. And then there's logical positivism. We can cover that. I'm not going to cover pragmatism tonight, I don't think, unless later and there's no callers, and we'll go back to it. But let's read a little bit more about Hume, and then let's read about logical empiricism. I may cover phenomenalism a little bit, so let's just keep reading unless someone wants to take a break and make a comment. Anybody? Dal, Perry? Anybody's welcome to. You good? All right. Love this shit. People can hate all they want. So, obviously David Hume, and he was He responded to Berkeley's
yeah.
criticism. He responded to Berkeley's criticisms of Locke, as well as other differences between early modern philosophers, and moved empiricism to a new level of skepticism. You know, he's the problem of induction man. He's the Hume's guillotine man. He's the Izot problem guy. He's the wise man apportions his beliefs to the evidence guy. So but he accepted that this has implications not normally accepted to other philosophers. He wrote, for example, quote, Locke divides all arguments into demonstrative and probable. On this view, we must say that it is only probable that all men must die or that the sun will rise tomorrow. This is his problem of induction, because neither of these can be demonstrated. But to conform our language to more common use, we ought to divide arguments into demonstrations, proofs, and probabilities. By proofs, meaning arguments and physics and all this kind of shit, you know. Testing back in these days didn't include very much real science that we use today. You know, if they're in the early days, you know, their observation, hypothesis testing, falsification, there wasn't a huge scientific community to put this out there to. They didn't have a way to disseminate all this information to all these different high-end learning facilities across the, you know, the Western world. And so a lot of this was just for the elite. You know what I mean? But anyway, Hume divided all of human knowledge into two categories: relations of ideas and matters of fact. Also, you know, similar to Kant's analytic synthetic distinction. So mathematical and logical propositions, tautologies, are examples of the first, what he would call relations of ideas, while propositions involving some contingent observation of the world, example, the sun rises in the east, are examples of the second, which is a matter of fact. So what he thought is all of people's ideas in turn are derived from their impressions of sensory experience. And ideas are therefore the faint copies of these sensations. So he had such an interesting view of the different, and he was less of a super OCD guy than Kant. Kant was probably, you know, Hume maintained that no knowledge, even the most basic beliefs about the natural world, can be conclusively established by reason. Sensing the world and science. Rather, he maintained our beliefs are more a result of the accumulated habits and sensations developed in, because a lot of this is the same information. Hume beat this stuff into people's heads. Among his many arguments, Hume also added another important slant to the debate about. Hume concluded that such things as belief in an external world, an objective reality, and belief in the existence of the self were not rational nonetheless, because of their profound basis in instinct and custom and intuition. Hume's lasting legacy, however, was the doubt that his skeptical argument. Skeptics who followed to cast similar doubt on pretty much everything. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about Hume?
It's hard to find a balance between being skeptical about everything, but also not being pedantic in how you talk and making like casual, absolute claims and stuff like that. But the issue with induction is a big one that obviously a man like Hume, one of the greatest philosophers at that time, had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the inductive reasoning, the problem induction, the fact that we accept uniformitarianism, and we accept that yesterday is going to be the same, that and continue to be that way, because all of our all of our observations in science start with inductive and abductive reasoning. You specifically observe a specific instance, and then you use that to generalize a rational principle. That's why it's not a good idea usually to argue from the specific to the general, because it's full of fallacies like that. But that's how you start. A little bit about phenomenalism, having to do with Hume. And then I'm going to read about logical empiricism, and we will save pragmatism and its little subfields for the next episode. I think we may be able to cover a couple of other things if people get bored or we don't have enough callers or whatever. But so phenomenalism, epistemological phenomenalism. Let's explain that. Most of Hume's followers have disagreed with his conclusion that belief in an external world is rationally unjustifiable. They contended that Hume's own principles implicitly contained the rational justification for his belief. So physical object is a kind of construction out of our
reiterating that this is like a background, right? This is like this is like your basic foundations. Just because I'm like reading down in the comments section, and people, I don't know, might not be understanding that. So I was trying to throw that out there.
I got you.
I hesitate to even look.
Yeah.
Well, the empirical methods are a part of epistemology, but they lead into how we see empirical evidence and how we see empirical data, what we get from the scientific method, what we get from processing all of this. And we will get into that. We will get into the philosophy of science. We will get into how science is seen today, the scientific method, and all that kind of stuff. We'll have at least a good 10-episode series on that, just to go through some of the basics of how science is done in terms of our justifications, especially speaking epistemologically. So I guess we've covered empiricism pretty well. We all get the idea that it was Hume and Locke and all these guys, and idealism and rationalism versus empiricism and rationalism. It's like everybody was an empiricist and a rationalist, but then they would also say, "Well, I hold specifically to subjective idealism," and it's just weird, man. All these people and all these arguments through all these years before they even knew that electricity fucking existed, or that any of that kind of stuff. But anyway,
Before they knew germ theory.
yeah, before they knew germ theory, like, it was a fucking punishment from the heavens or whatever you want to call it. But all right, so we got Dal in here. Dal, I haven't heard from you. What you got on your mind? I'm gonna go through my speakers here a little bit, and then we'll go off on tangents and talk about stuff and invite some callers in.
I'm just kind of hanging out. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think we've discussed this at length a couple. I think I really agree with Scott that, like, in my mind, if you lock a baby in a dark